Be bold, and unseen forces will come to your aid. I'm Beverly Lewis. I'm an executive trainer and speaker, and I want to speak to you today about 7 ways to step into your bold identity. I had an experience recently that reminded me of why it's important for all of us to be bold when we are doing new things, conquering new tasks, undertaking assignments. Boldness is a very important leadership quality. So what happened to me, it's kind of a funny story. I have a friend who had backyard chickens, and she was hospitalized unexpectedly, and because I live in the country and have had chickens before, I was elected to be the one in charge of the care and feeding of the chickens. Not a hard job, except for one small problem: a very mean rooster. Now, he had attacked me before when I'd been over at her house. And so I warned my husband. I asked him to go help me. I said, there's a really mean rooster. And he said, oh, he just needs an attitude adjustment. Well, what turned out is both of us had an attitude adjustment. I was reminded of the importance of how to stand up strong when you're feeling fear anyway and get your bold identity. So I'm going to give you 7 ways to do that today. I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow description of what happened between me and that rooster, but I will tell you that I realized, he weighs about 3 pounds. He was so little. I know where the word cocky comes from. My gosh, he was mean and arrogant and aggressive, but I got bold and took care of my assignment. So I want to tell you 7 bold things that I learned from a character that is a history-making one. Everybody's heard the story of David and Goliath. Now, not to even compare me and a chicken with David and Goliath. However, there are 7 lessons in that epic story that I want to share with you today. David went from being a lowly shepherd boy all the way to the ruler of a nation. He was the king of Israel. So what did he learn? What was so epic? And what's the wisdom and the nuggets in that story for us today? 7 things that you can use in stepping into whatever is challenging you right now. And the first one is that the obstacles we face and the challenges we meet can develop resilience and strengthen us if we have the right attitude. Now, David was not really very respected by his brothers or his family. He was assigned to this low job of keeping the sheep, but he developed all kind of strengths in that process, and one of them was he killed lions and bears with just a slingshot. He learned how to defend the weak, but he also did it with an attitude that in his spare time he was a musician. He played the harp, he sang, he created songs that are still with us today. So he had a great attitude in the midst of adversity and a pretty unrecognized position. The second thing is that we all have feelings of inadequacy. They're normal. David was not a warrior, and yet he went out there as a kid and defeated an army that was not an army, a giant that had the whole army shaking in its boots. So the thing that strikes me about that part of the story is he said to Goliath, "Who are you to defy the army of the living God?" And I think that sometimes we have to stand up to our circumstances, or it might not be a person, it might not be something living, but we have to stand up and say to those things, who are you, circumstances, to steal my abilities, to make me cower in fear? And just that act of doing that can make us feel bolder. The third thing is to expect criticism. David's brothers made fun of him. The other people, the soldiers in the army, made fun of him when he said that he was going to take down the giant. They all laughed, they scoffed, and we have to do what we're being called to do regardless of the naysayers. And that's the lesson in number 3. Number 4 is to beware of well-meaning advice that doesn't apply to you. You know, a lot of people try to tell you how to get things done, and you have to filter through that. You have to do what you know in your heart and in your mind is the right thing to do. And sometimes we just have to realize that what worked for somebody else at a different time and a different place and time doesn't necessarily work for us, and we have to be willing to be bold in what we're strong in. You know, in this particular case with David, it was that King Saul had tried to give him his armor and tried to give him his sword, and David was not experienced with that, and he was too little. He was too small to wear the armor of the current king. He ended up going out with his slingshot. That's what he knew he was good at. So the fifth thing is to show up and do the work. It's said that David didn't set out to slay a giant. He set out to take provisions to his brothers, but there was a giant in the way. So sometimes we have to show up even when we feel like what we're doing is kind of just drudgery. Some days we think, golly, what am I doing? Doesn't make any difference. And yet opportunity comes when we're faithful in the preparation. It's said that, let's see, spectacular achievement is always preceded by unspectacular preparation, and that's the showing up and doing the work. Number 6 is to know your strengths, to train and prepare and stay alert and vigilant for the opportunities to apply what you've learned. And number 7 is to dare to dream. We either live out of our memory, looking back, or out of our imagination. And we are created to be creative, to live out of our imaginations. Children are so good at that. They don't see all of the obstacles and problems. They just dream. And I think as adults, we have to remind ourselves to do that. Sometimes when we consistently choose what is predictable and safe, it ends up being a rut. And you know what they say about ruts, that it's just a grave with the ends kicked out of it. So that's not how we want to live. There's no one else like you on the planet. There's no one else called to say what you need to say, to create what you need to create. And the only way you're going to do it is to step into your bold identity. So I wanted to give you those tips today. I hope that they help. And you know, I'm always going to encourage you by saying the best is yet to come. Let's step up and go do it. Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon.